Hi everybody. The purpose of this video is to make sure all of us are achieving the competency represented by Project 0C. So 0C is less of an assignment in the intellectual sense than a basic competency with our tools and development environment that we all have to achieve before we can succeed in this course. So let's start by forking the project. So we'll visit this URL that takes us to the original repository with the EchoTest project, and we'll create a fork here on the left. Fork, and put this into our own Bitbucket account. And then we'll have to make sure we check private repository, and we can leave the rest as the default. And this clones the repository into our own account, creating a fork, which means it's tied to the original repository from which we forked it. Okay, now we're done with step 4, and now the step that is pretty easy is to share this with the instructor and the TA. So back to the repository, and we would go into settings, and here access management, and then here we say write access, and we would type the user ID, which in this case is Azraf Al, and he pops right up. And so here you just make sure it says write in case we need to make any corrections to get it to work, that we can then push back, and then we say add, and that's it. Okay, the next step is to develop using SBT, and these are not alternatives. We have to be able to develop using SBT and the integrated development environment idea. So the reason is we don't always have an IDE available. So in those cases, we'll want to be able to develop on the command line using a regular text editor. For example, if we want to develop remotely, let's say if we're carrying a Chromebook or an iPad or something, and we want to develop by logging into a remote server where we have the actual command line development tools available. Okay, so the first step is cloning the fork we just created to our terminal. So we'll go to a terminal, and right here we can make this a little bigger. And now we don't have a copy of this repository locally here. So what we need to do is copy the repository URL. So going back here to the overview page, and the one you'll want is, assuming that you've done the steps in George's video or the equivalent steps on Mac or Unix, you copy this SSH based URL, and now you say hg clone, and then you paste this. So this will check out the copy that you own, meaning that you can then commit changes back to it or push changes back to it. Okay, so now we can change directories into this URL, into this local repository, and now we can see what we have. So ls recursively, and this is basically the structure we expect. So there's a main and a test section of the Scala sources, and we're ready to go. Let's look at the instructions again, and we should be able to run the project and test the project. Okay, so we'll say sbt run. And here is the expected output. Now we'll do SBT test. Fail, as expected. Back to the instructions. So now we have to fix the error. That part I'll leave up to you. Then rerun the tests, etc. And what I will do instead is I will make a different change that will give me something that I can actually commit and push. So I can use, for example, my favorite text editor, Emacs. So I'm editing this main file, and I can just add a line saying bye at the end. And by the way, this is the right structure for Scala console app. You just extend app, and then in the body of that object, you can just put your expressions, which play the role of a statement. Okay, save. And now we can say hg status, and it says, okay, we've modified this file. And now we need to say hg commit added line to main app. So that's the commit. That is a local commit, and now we need to push the changes back. So we need to say hg push. That pushes them back to the remote repository. And now we should be able to see the changes on the remote side. So we'll go back to our repository, and on the left we can look at the commits, and we should see the one we just performed. So 21 seconds ago, added line to main app. So this is successful. And this means we're done with the part, almost done, developing using SBT. We still have to delete the local copy from the file system. So we back out and now say remove -rf. Be careful with that in general. Echo test -scala, and it's gone. Okay. Now we're ready to continue with basically the same steps, but using IDEA. Okay. So going to IDEA, what we need to do is check out from version control. So, and now we need to say mercurial, and we need to paste, whoop, that was the wrong thing. We need to pull this from our little clipboard. Here it is. So we need to paste that echo test URL, and then just verify the parent directory in which it's going to check it out. And the directory name by default, it makes the same as the repository name. So we can test this, and if you set up everything correctly, following George's video, this should succeed. And now we can say clone. So that is equivalent to an HG clone. And it's doing those steps. And now here you can just say yes, because it recognizes, using the Scala plugin, that there's a build.sbt file, and it offers us to open that. So we say yes, and then here check auto import. And there should be a project SDK if you configured IntelliJ IDEA correctly per my first video. And now we hit OK. And this gives us some tips which we can close. And now we're seeing echo test Scala. And we can actually look at the project by opening the project view, which we could do from up here, Tool Windows Project, or on Mac Command 1. And there's a different shortcut on Windows. So now we can drill into this. And we can expand this view, so we can now look at our instructions, and we're supposed to run it by right-clicking on main and choosing run main. So we still have to expand this until we see the actual main class. So let's try this. And if it's not doing it, it's because it's still busy indexing, basically analyzing the code of your project and doing an initial build. Okay. It did something now. Let's try again. So it still doesn't show run with a green arrow. So we'll have to wait just a little longer. Check again. Not yet. Making progress. Here we go. See, so it analyzed it now and recognizes that there's a main app. Now we right click on that, and here it says run main. Hit that. And it's ready to go, and it's doing its thing with our little extra functionality here at the end. Okay, great. So the next step is to run a test, and we're expanding that section now, so we can run, for example, echo test, which looks like this. So let's run this. Right click, and it gives us that option. And it shows the two fails in a more visually comprehensible way than the console output. Everything else is pretty much the same. Okay, very good. So we were able to perform these steps. And in principle, we can make another change. So what we can do is, for example, in main, remove that line like this. And now we should be able to commit that change back. And you see how it shows it in a slightly different color, in green, meaning it's been modified locally. And now we can right click on the project root, or we can go into here into VCS and say Mercurial and say commit directory. So let me actually back out of this menu. VCS Mercurial commit directory. And now we get to enter, that's good practice to enter a commit message. And up here, it'll show you every file that has been changed. And down here, it'll show you the before and after. So you see how the line has been removed. And now we shouldn't forget to type a brief comment, so remove additional line in main. And now we can say commit. The most convenient thing is just to say commit and push. So it'll do it all in one step. And here, this is the famous part where it warns you about the package structure not matching the folder structure, which in Scala is not required. So these are warnings that are safe to ignore. And now we can say commit. And now we can also say push to confirm the push. And you see down here, it's reporting the progress and ultimately says pushed successfully, pushed one commit. We'll verify that here by reloading these commits, and voila, remove the additional line in main. We succeeded, and that was step 8.